Welcome to AiTalks, a place to come and listen to IBM customers, partners and colleagues talk about the digital organization and how AI, hybrid cloud and enterprise software is critical to success. Let me hand over to my colleagues to get us started. Welcome to AiTalks podcast, another exciting episode in our journey discovering how technology is helping clients and partners deal with the future and the uncertainty that's going on. And today it's a great pleasure to be firstly joined by my colleague, Paul Gatland. Hi, Paul. And also from one of our great business partners, Max EU, Neil Plumridge. Yeah, good to see you both guys, but most importantly though, our guests. So today I'd like to introduce you to Jamie Davis from Fidelity. Jamie, nice to welcome you to AiTalks.
Morning guys, how you all doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. I think we're still in the same situation, sitting where we were all for the last 12 months. So desperate for some other change of scenery, but it is what it is right now. So Jamie, thank you so much for giving up your time. Just to kick it off, probably this podcast is really just personal points of view. So all of us represent our companies, but really it's just our thoughts on things that are going to happen. So on that basis, Jamie, could you just maybe intro yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll just start asking some questions, if that's okay.
Sure, by all means. So I work for Fidelity International in corporate services. My focus is on change management. Main role really is looking at the future workplace, how we need to adapt, improve employee experience. But touching in that, certainly in recent years, has been a focus on digital and technology, and also how we mine and use data.
Thank you. I like the last bit, mine and use data. Neil, I think you want to get started. You've got some burning questions for Jamie.
It's quite handy to have Jamie here to use some of his industry skills and industry knowledge. Obviously, we work on the software side of things. So it's always good to get feedback from people at the coalface, so to speak, that are actually dealing with the challenges that the current situation is leading to. So, I mean, I think start this off, Jamie. Do you think that businesses that currently own or rent quite a lot of office space are likely to keep similar levels of staff, but reduce the amount of space that they're actually putting them into? And if so, what sort of challenges do you think that that's likely to present within the industry, and how do you think you're all likely to be able to meet those challenges?
Well, I think the first challenge is actually identifying whether people will rent or own less office space. It depends on a number of factors: economic competition, the health of your business as you come out of a pandemic, and culturally how you've adapted to working from home. So I think there's far too many levers to broad brush this. My personal view: there is always going to be a place for the workplace. I think those companies that want to encourage the best possible talent probably reshape their workplace. So it's a blend between home working and office. That raises the question whether there's space to give back to landlords. However, you may find that businesses start to try and encourage people into the office by offering good catering, by offering wellness facilities, gymnasiums, changing rooms, etc. I just think it's far too early to call how businesses will respond. Personally, I think we're still in crystal ball territory.
It'd be interesting to see how many people need to be encouraged to come back to the office. I kind of get the feeling, I mean, I've worked from home for years, but this is very different from working from home. I'm amazed that I'm actually missing getting on a train and going up to London in the morning. So I suspect a lot of people will want to come back into the office, which in itself presumably presents additional challenges, because you might get in a situation where you have more people coming back in than you've currently configured the office for.
Certainly, I'm in the camp of behaviour will change. I also think that change won't be extreme. So when we're able to go back to the office, we will. When this health emergency is a year behind us, my suspicion is we'll not flood back to the office, but we'll be back in greater numbers than people imagine. You know, particularly those people that work in cities. You're not going there just to work. There's entertainment, there's theatres, there's restaurants, there's bars, and colleagues aren't just people you work with. It's a friend network at the end of the day. So my view is It's too early to call. We've got a behaviour now which we've all got very used to, and if you surveyed people, I'm sure that they would give you a bias towards that 10 months, 12 months of experience. But if you ask the same question 4 months, 5 months, 12 months after returning to normality, I think you'll end up with a completely different outlook.
I guess my question, Jamie, is around room booking. So with companies, I think having a change in space, and I guess at this point we're not sure whether they'll have more space or less space. But really, I guess my question is around, what your view is on room booking. Will it be more critical with this change in space, or potentially could it disappear altogether?
Well, this is where I do have quite an extreme view. So my view is that room booking, desk booking, wayfinding is just the tip of the iceberg. I actually think that's easy technology that is easy to deploy. We're probably looking down at the future, looking at virtual apps, workplace apps that enable you to bring teams together. So you're not booking a desk anymore, you're booking a team table, and you're not just booking a physical space, but you're booking your team in. If we do have this future where it's home working and office work, I would imagine most people will be going into the office for a purpose: meet people, meet their team. The efficiency of gathering people, getting a space, getting from front door to desk. When it was your desk, it was obvious. In future, you're going to have access to a building, but not own a desk and potentially not own a space. My view is we will see more workplace apps. They will not be about booking space. They'll be about connecting us with space, connecting us with our colleagues, and dealing with all the efficiency of organising our week.
No, that's really interesting, Jamie. And it's your view, I think, is not dissimilar to how we've looked at the market generally. I think a lot of this, if we've heard the phrase workplace and workspace, and it's going to be a big change. We've also seen, from another organisations, just around how teams work together as well, because I know certainly in your world, you had the idea of neighbourhoods.
I don't think anything's going to disappear, right? So I think there will be assigned desks for the people that need them. Perhaps they use specialist technology. Perhaps they work in a tight group, or there's compliance issues. Neighbourhoods have proved to work, where you have 100 desks, but potentially 140 people assigned to that space. I think you'll just see those ratios change. I still think that's an important part of the future. If we step on a little bit and we look at the space that's dedicated to desks, my suspicion is you'll see that diminish. I think what you'll see is fewer desks in the office. I think you'll see an increase in collaboration space, an increase in open plan social space, an increase in solo space, team tables. So I think you'll see a lot of venues evolve that sit between the traditional desk meeting room. And it will be businesses that decide to blend for themselves, depend on their particular culture.
And on a previous podcast, we had Andy Stanford-Clark, who's IBM CTO, and he made an interesting point, which was he felt that we might use more virtual reality meeting rooms to try and bridge the gap, a Zoom type experience with all of the challenges that brings, by actually using virtual reality, a bit like Second Life was many years ago, but actually to use that so you virtually join a conference room with your colleagues and have a different kind of situational experience or aura. I mean, do you think that's just techie talk that really isn't valid, or do you think there might be some interest in that?
No, I think technology's got a huge part to play in this discussion. I think one of the concerns when we do return to the office, given the scenario where people will have the choice to work from home or the office, there's every possibility you will join a team meeting, you'll be sat next to 3 people and you'll have 4 people on the line. That I think is going to become challenging because you're going to get a lot of acoustic interference from the people that are sat around you. Some of that needs to be resolved through good office design. Some of that will need to be resolved through improvements in technology, and that might be hardware with noise cancelling microphones and other bits and pieces. But I suspect the Zoom offer is just the tip of the iceberg, and we'll see conferencing solutions, whiteboarding, virtual whiteboarding solutions improve over the course of the next couple of years.
That's interesting. I know, Neil, I've kind of teed you up nicely because you've got quite a thing about natural voice and Alexa and all those sort of gadgets about in the home.
Obviously, everybody's been working from home for quite some time now, some of us sort of over a year. And I think a lot of people got used to some of their creature comforts and home tech, things like smart speakers, etc. I think I use my Alexa more than any other gadget, although that might be just because it's nice to have somebody to talk to occasionally, which is a bit sad. The products like IBM Tririga have recently implemented natural voice input. So you can talk to your phone to book a meeting room or raise a maintenance request, or a hot desk or whatever, or you can just go straight into Teams and type as if you were talking to a human being, which removes the requirement to learn to use a piece of software. Do you think the current situation has driven changes in the way that we look at interacting with our buildings and having much more natural interactions rather than just pieces of software is something that's likely to be a thing over the next sort of couple of years?
Not sure I know the answer to that, if I'm perfectly honest. I think there's technology that's being developed that we will all adopt. You can now dictate to Word, for example. Your point about Alexa and smart speakers and all the other bits and pieces. These are all great bits of technology, but they've got to get through your cybersecurity, your compliance, and I'm sure lots of companies will use this technology. The drawback will be whether it's suitable for any particular business in terms of the difficulties of implementation. My general view on technology is if it's there and it adds value and it's a benefit, then why wouldn't you? It becomes slightly more challenging when you start to talk about integrating different solutions and different platforms. But again, my view is that technology should be there to make life easier. And if it makes life easier in one area but makes it more challenging in another area, then I start to waver on the point. But I do think we'll leverage technology. It will be to engage with your physical environment, not replace it.
You kind of need the software to be as seamless as possible, right? Stuff's going to be going on in the background all the time. But if you've got to learn how to use a computer program, then I think for the average person, obviously there's going to be sort of administrators and stuff. But for the average person, that presents a barrier to use. The reason I use my Alexa so much is because I just talk to it. And if you can get away with those things, then I think that's actually a bit of a sea change in the way that all of this stuff works. You have a very valid point, though, Jamie, about the security of it, because obviously there's a lot of people moaning about the security of your Alexa because it's recording your voice all the time.
Well, look, I just think you need to be cautious when you talk about how you're going to use and deploy technology, right? No, I do not want to be an expert in the technology, but these days I don't think I need to be. I think if you get your source data sorted and you can connect different applications, you can pretty much develop anything. My general view is organizations that provide software need to sort of wake up a little bit, smell the coffee, and be as open protocol as possible. And those that aren't, in my view, will probably struggle. General rule for me when it comes to work applications is don't customize them. Keep them as out the box as possible. Rely on the provider to do the updates and the development, and leverage it as best you can. From experience, we're not always good at that. That's not always the case, and I would imagine that's the world over.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying about trying to keep it invisible, right? you not only want the technology to be invisible, but you want the implementation and the upgrades and all that kind of stuff to be as invisible to you guys as well. You want to be able to say, I want it to do this, and it just does that, and it carries on doing that over a period of time. You don't necessarily want to be involved in that process. You want other people to provide that and make sure that it all works for you as seamlessly as possible.
Well, I'll give you an example. Right? I've got an entire health suite set up on my mobile phone, right? So I've got an app that does my nutrition. I've got an app that does my exercise. I've got an app that does my body measurements. And it all pulls it through, so it all syncs nicely into one dashboard. It doesn't duplicate data. It shares it perfectly. This app gives me messages on a almost on a daily basis in terms of advice to you need to work out more. You've let yourself go a little bit this week. That adds value to me, and I guess with the advent of apps, I haven't had to put any effort into that. I've plugged in a few bits of details and I've connected a few apps to other apps, and I press go when I exercise. I take a picture of the barcode on the side of the packet of food that I'm about to eat, and hey presto, it all pulls together. I want it to be that simple. If it's any more complicated than that, I'm not going to bother.
Sadly, I think if I had an app like that, it would start off crying and then start shouting and then stop talking to me.
Oh, I'm not saying mine doesn't cry or shout.
Applications retaining value to get you to use it, which is all part of the design, obviously, of the app. And then we think about the corporate world. Too often, there are a lot of corporate apps where there's not a great incentive for anyone to use it, but we just have to because they're the rules. But I had a fascinating roundtable the other week with some people from the rail industry, and the conversation went from here, where we are now, right through to, well, data will have to appear on the balance sheet as an asset, because at the moment, it's not seen as, it's an intangible, but it's not even classed as that. So, and the conversation was, what happens when that happens? Because suddenly the data that we're all collecting in, ridiculous amounts, suddenly has a value. And what is that going to do? And again, that might be pie in the sky, although I think it's happening already in certain industries. And that will really go back to, your original comment, Jamie, about mining the data, because, someone sees it now on the balance sheet. It's got some definition. Anyway, listen, this is great. Let's keep plugging on. This is really good, Jamie. Thank you. Paul, I think we wanted to just change the tone slightly and move about space, didn't we?
We touched on this before when we spoke about room booking and, as spaces change. I think with space at the moment, if as and when the doors open and we can get back to the office, there's going to be rules we've got to follow in terms of distancing, and currently I think we're around 2 meters. That may increase or decrease. Ultimately, we're going to have a lot of space that's not usable. So I guess my question really is around what your view on space requirements of organizations will be going forward. One answer is it could be organizations could need less space, but I just wondered, could there also be the situation where organizations need more space? Because if you've got distancing rules in place and you need everyone in the office, then you're not going to have enough space to deal with that.
Well, I think there's two competing views in my mind on this. First is it's human nature to put horrible events behind us quite quickly. One view is we will quickly forget about this health emergency and we'll go back to the pub and the commute quite quickly. We'll not give it another thought. The second thought is that actually the immediate health emergency is over, but it forever lingers. COVID will always be something that causes our ears to prick up every time it's said in the news, and I just don't know, right? So, will we crave more space between people? I think those people that are prone to hygiene probably will. Those people that ate mud as children perhaps won't. And I just don't know how to call it. And my view is, if you're going to start introducing social distancing culturally, across the country, if you're going to start introducing social distancing as a concept in the office, then you're going to start introducing that concept on buses, on trains, aeroplanes, airports, pubs, restaurants, theatres. For me, I can't see it. I think we will move back to something close to normality. Just as soon as the health emergency is in the history, we'll do it quite quickly.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to think that way as well, Jamie, because certainly it would be great to get things back as they were. And I think there's some things that I think it has highlighted to us in this, in the last 12 months that I think is certainly a positive. But also, I would certainly advocate it would be great to to get back into something where there's perhaps less distancing in the office and you can collaborate with your colleagues without shouting over the other side of the room.
Travel systems like flying and trains, they're systems designed to bring us all together, and those systems are not going to change. They're part of our fabric. There might be minor changes, but they're still going to operate the way they have done, and therefore we will be on a train with someone sitting next to us. We'll be on a plane with someone sitting next to us, and as you're absolutely right, I think we'll just get on with it and reflect back a bit like things like that happened with other tragic events in our time, and just to move on to that, what is your thoughts about, there's a lot of talk anyway about, okay, how short term maybe digital identity to get access to buildings, whether it's an office or football stadium or a cinema or whatever. Do you think there's some validity in that? Might be a short term requirement to prove that I've got a digital record of my vaccination jab, or maybe that will become a permanent feature, like wearing seatbelts or some of the things we had to deal with after 9/11. What are your personal thoughts on that? Valid or not?
I think if we're talking COVID 2023, probably valid. I think if we see the back of this virus, globally we start to recover, I can't see us having any kind of digital passport. I can stretch to having to demonstrate that you've had the vaccine before you travel into Europe in the summer, potentially. Beyond that, it would really depend on how the immediate future plays out. If we're still talking about, sadly, death rates as high as they are, and they're higher than the ordinary death rate within a population, then clearly governments will be forced to do something to manage it. But I don't hear any talk at the moment that's the case.
I think my biggest concern about digital identity is it's difficult enough to get people to wear face masks. If you tell them they need to be able to, despite the fact that they're going to carry around their driving license and various other forms of identification, I think human nature, again, we've touched on this before about people forgetting and just going back to the way that things were, as soon as they're able to. I think human nature is that there would be quite a big backlash against having some form of digital identification. I mean, my wife has had both vaccine jabs because of the nature of her job. So she has a piece of paper that says on it what vaccine she's had and when she had it and all that kind of stuff. But I would be surprised if people would use that as a form of identification in the long term.
I think the point is valid. That level of technology gets introduced for a purpose. If I give another example, when was the last time any of you touched cash?
Yeah, not recently.
So if you'd gone back 12 months and said, you know what, we're going to move the UK to a cashless environment, I'm sure there would have been uproar. And yet at the moment, if you do buy anything, you're doing it cashless. And actually, as a population, we've tended to migrate to that quite seamlessly. Now I know there will be groups and communities that have found that quite difficult, or not able to do it at all. But for the vast majority of us, I'd be very surprised if we go back to cash. And I think I read last week that Apple Pay is now thinking about upping the value of a contactless payment to £100. Now that puts in, certainly my bucket, probably 95% of my spend would now work cashless.
Given your role within your organisation, how have you, Jamie, specifically been dealing with or coping with the changes to your working environment, and what impact has it had on you in your ability to be able to determine the future path of the working environment at Fidelity?
Well, my personal experience hasn't been terrible at all, right? I would put myself in that group that's adapted well to home working, for various reasons. My children are grown up, largely self-sufficient. I've got space which is private, and I've got the ability to set up space to replicate my office. So from that perspective, I've done amazingly well. Now, I recognise that I do not represent the average, and there are some people that are having a dreadful experience and will be craving to get back to the office. From a mental well-being perspective, again, not a terrible experience. Fortunately, me and my wife get on very well. And at the beginning of lockdown, we were already thinking about getting a dog, and that's been amazing. I mean, that gets us out twice a day, and I get to walk 10K a day. So that's amazing. I guess if I stop thinking about me for a second, the way that the office might change if people aren't aware of it is group thinking might take hold, and you may get voices that are not heard in the office. And what I mean by that, I found conference calls quite a leveler. You all take up a square inch at the bottom of the screen, and in my experience, most people on the team have participated. I think when you return to the office, and I won't put a demographic on it, or try not to, but my suspicion is you will get a little bit of leadership, a little bit of assertive personality, and you may lose the voice of the introverts. And I think that's something that everyone should be aware of and cautious to. And not only that, right? There are a number of factors. The way that we work is going to change. We should avoid group thinking, which means everyone should still have a voice and an opinion. We should induct people into the role, into the culture as fast as we did pre-COVID, which means a level of interaction and face-to-face, in my opinion. So I think there's a lot to be cautious about. They're not showstoppers. You just need to be aware of them before they happen and put measures in place to avoid it.
Jamie, thank you. Your contribution, his insight is really, really good. I know we're all about personal views. It's exactly what I think people need to hear. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank Paul.
Thanks.
I want to thank Neil.
You're welcome.
People listening to this podcast, if you've enjoyed it, tell other people. If you've got any suggestions, just let us know. Thank you for listening to AI Talks podcast.